creeps, Andy here, and today I wanted to talk about the best books of 2023 so far. So these are books that I read in 2023. Not all of them came out this year, but I think I think only one did actually. And some are older, some are newer. It's a mixture of everything. They're just the best books that I've read so far. So usually I do this once or twice a year, but last year I read 47 books all of last year. This year I read, quick calculations, 8, 16, 24, 34 books I've read so far this year. That's insane. That's crazy. I don't know how this is happening. But I figured maybe I'll do these every few months so that you get more of a breakdown of each. So that way at the end of the year when I'm, just going through it and I include all of my favorite books, you have a little bit more detail about each one. So these are the best books that I've read so far in 2023. The first one that I read, I'm just gonna talk about them in order of which I've read them, but I enjoy all of them. But The Whisper Man by Alex North. So I had read his other book, I think it's called The Shadows or something about shadows. Anyways, I read that a year or two ago. I enjoyed it. I thought it was a good story. So I knew I was gonna like this one, but I read it and I loved this one. I loved it. This book is so well written. It's great. It's one of my favorite horror books ever. It really is fantastic. It's about a boy and his son. They move to a new house and the boy is experiencing some pretty creepy things. He's saying creepy things, he's doing creepy things. If he were my child, I'd give him up for adoption, but he's this guy's child and the guy was like, I'll just stick with him. There's also another aspect of the story where there's a serial killer who's abducting and murdering young boys. So that's going on kind of parallel to this plot. And then you have kind of a third thing going on where you have a cop that put this man away, talking to him about this new killer that is abducting and murdering young boys. So you have quite a few lines that you're jumping in between, but everything is just so well written and it's just such a cool story. And I love the way that everything comes around and ties together. So The Whisper Man was given the name given to the serial killer Frank Carter, who is the man that is incarcerated. But now there are rumors that the young boys are being abducted by hearing whispering and things like that. And so people are like, is he an accomplice to this killer? Is he a copycat? What's going on? So they're trying to solve this. And then you have the young boy who's living with his father who begins to act strangely and hear whispering outside of his window at night. Yeah, it's really cool. There's horror in here, there's thriller, there's mystery, there's kind of a little bit of everything, and I really like it. I would say that, obviously anytime you have a police officer who's going into jail talking to a cop, you're gonna get Silence of the Lambs vibes from it. There's also butterflies in here or moths or something. And so it does have a little bit of a Silence of the Lambs feel to it. So if you like that, I think you'll enjoy this one. I enjoyed the heck out of this book. Like, I was blown away by this. I could not put it down. So that is one of the best books that I read this year. The next one is The Cabin at the End of the Woods. Nope. The Cabin at the End of the World by Paul Tremblay. This one I know has mixed feelings because it is left for interpretation of the reader, but I love this book and I've read it twice now, and I read it this year because the movie came out. I did a movie first book. In case you missed that, I'll leave it linked down below. But it's about two men who are married. They have a child. They rent a cabin to stay in for a few days on vacation. 4 people break into the cabin, tie them up, and tell them that if they do not willingly sacrifice one of them, that the world will end. And they have their proof of the impending apocalypse that will ensue if they do not make a decision. It's a really interesting story. It's extremely well written, and you do have kind of 2 interesting characters. One is definitely more religious and I feel like open to the idea of the unbelievable, whereas the other one's very agnostic and more based in reality or what he believes reality to be. And so the characters are pretty opposing in that way, even though they are in a relationship and as a couple and they do, love and respect each other. You do get different viewpoints of them. The viewpoint in the book is alternating, so you get to go back and forth between them, also their kid, and also even at the end, some of the people who have broken into the cabin. So you get a mixed bag. Hold on, my cat's ripping apart the carpet to try to get in the room. 1 second. What are you doing? Get in here. Yeah. She's also the one that ate the crap out of this book too. But anyways, so I love this book. I have heard some people say that they believe that the writing is lazy because it's left up to the interpretation of the reader, but I promise you, I promise you, you have to be a good writer to make it believable either way. For me personally, it's not a lazy way of writing, it's an even more exceptional way of writing, that there's not one conclusive ending. In fact, the first time that I read it and the second time that I read it, I had very different feelings, and this book surprises me. Yeah, each time I read it, it gets better and better. I freaking love this book. I love Paul Tremblay. I think he's a fantastic writer. The next book that I read that I enjoyed very much this year was Bret Easton Ellis's The Shards. And I had talked about this one in my reading wrap-up. It's about a young boy who is in high school. Another young boy, well, I guess they're adults, I don't call them young boys, they're like 18-year-old boys, but another kid comes to the school and he kind of threatens to throw Bret. It's written like it's a true story. It's an interesting book. So he threatens to throw Bret's entire life off balance, like his popularity, his friend group, everything's kind of falling apart because this new boy comes. At the same time, there's a serial killer in Los Angeles that is murdering young girls. Some of his friends end up coming up murdered or not, and you have to kind of put the pieces together. You have your unreliable narrator. Bret is extremely unreliable, and he becomes more unreliable as the story progresses because you see him take more drugs, be more irrational and erratic, and kind of lose his shit more and more. It is such an interesting story. It's definitely in the middle of Less Than Zero and American Psycho, but it is, I would say, it leans more on the Less Than Zero side. If you haven't read Less Than Zero and American Psycho, I truly do not know how you'll feel about this book. You are on your own. I cannot promise anything. If you've liked both American Psycho and Less Than Zero, you're gonna absolutely love this because it's right in the middle of both, and it's definitely has like the nihilistic, it's not as nihilistic as Less Than Zero is, but it definitely has those nihilistic, you know, teen trouble, really messed up circumstances for young people to be in, like Less Than Zero, with some horror and messed up stuff that happens in like American Psycho. The horror is few and far between, however, it is unique and interesting and fucked up. So that's all I will say. I will not necessarily recommend this book to everyone because if this is your first taste of Bret Easton Ellis, I don't know how you will feel. But I love his writing, and therefore I loved this book, and that's kind of where I'll leave that. The next book that is maybe one of my favorite books of all time now, and I had it for so long, and I just read it this year, is Tender is the Flesh by Augustina Bazterrica. This book is so amazing. I love this book so much. It's about a dystopian future where humans are now bred to be consumed by other humans. So you have this interesting hierarchy of humanity that adds, it's an interesting comment on so many things, but you know, people are still regarded as being part of that hierarchy in society. They're separated as far as the people that are to consume other humans and to be consumed by other humans. But then there's even a hierarchy within that, and you know, different colors or the way that the meat is raised determines their importance in society as well. So I think it's a really interesting comment on a lot of things, on how society is just built and we're just told to go along with it and things can just be accepted and moved past, on how humans are treated and the hierarchy of human treatment, on how quickly things can become messed up, on how quickly people can get used to fucked up stuff. It's a comment on a lot of messed up stuff, but you also go through this plant, this processing plant, and see a human being turn into a product, and it's so messed up and it's written so mundanely that it makes it even more disturbing. Because you're like, how is this not bothering you? You're a human ripping apart other humans. You know, they talked about skinning them and pulling apart muscles and limbs and eyes and putting them in different categories and shipping them. And oh God, it's so messed up. I love this book so much, you guys. It's so good. But I know it has mixed reviews as well. But those seem to be the books that I enjoy the most. I mean, man, I love this book. I'm going to read it again soon because I don't know if I can go a whole nother year without reading for it. But let's see if there's any just random quotes that I highlighted. This says, "After all, since the world's begun, we've been eating each other. If not symbolically, then we've been literally gorging on each other. The transition has enabled us to be less hypocritical." So the reason why they begin consuming humans is because there is supposedly an illness that has made all livestock ill. We're unable to eat them. So we had to kill all the livestock and then replenish that meat supply with something else. If you take the time to really read between the lines on this book, it's a brilliant book. So yeah, I mean, I'll say the same thing as I did before. Do I recommend this book to everyone? No. Do I think that it's an important book to read? Yes. How about this? His father is a person of integrity. That's why he went crazy. I mean, there's just so much in here. I understand why it's controversial. I understand why some people love it and some people hate it, but it's one of my favorite books I've ever read and I adore it. Next up here, we have Ray Russell's The Case Against Satan. This is a fantastic book. It really surprised me. It's a pretty old book. It was published in the 60s and it talks about a lot of interesting topics. It's about possession, but it's not at all about possession. It talks a little bit about the issues within the church. It talks a little bit about, honestly, it does comment a little bit about the issues in society and judgment and things like that as well. It's not really about a possession. Like, it is, but it isn't. And I can't really give too much away because I want, if you do end up picking this book up, to be as surprised as I was. But it does seem to be an influence on a lot of possession novels and films, because there are some definitely things that have become tropes, I think, because of this book or related material. But then it's also more than that. And it's a really interesting read. It honestly surprised the crap out of me. It's a really short little novella. It's a few hundred pages, and I really enjoyed this one. So yeah, The Case Against Satan, man. But I would say if you're going into it, don't even think about possession and just enjoy it for what it is. Because if you're going into it thinking that it's going to be The Exorcist, you're going to be disappointed. What a great read. And then the last book that I've been talking about a lot is Tess Gerritsen, I still don't know how to pronounce it, The Surgeon. This book is freaking fantastic. It's so good. It's amazing. This is one of the best crimey, police detective seeks the madman books I've ever read. It's, I think, up there with Silence of the Lambs. This book is phenomenal. It's about a woman who's a surgeon that has survived being attacked by a guy who, ironically, is named the Surgeon. He ends up killing women and removing their uteruses just for fun. He's a weirdo. And so she ends up killing him, but now another serial killer has emerged, and it seems like it could be potentially a copycat or something. And so you have detectives working on the case, you have this victim who has survived and murdered the original surgeon, and then you have this potential killer copycat. I will say, it's pretty sensitive to female topics. It does talk a lot about non-consensual stuff, and obviously the taking of the uterus is pretty symbolic, so it is disturbing in relation to women. So if you're sensitive to those topics, I would skip out on this one. But if you just want like a great comparison to Silence of the Lambs, I would pick this up. It is phenomenal. This book blew me away. Loved every second of it, and if you guys have watched any of my book hauls, you know that I've bought a ton of her other books now because of that one. So yeah, those are my favorite books that I've read so far this year. Please feel free to leave a comment of your favorite and least favorite books. Let's have a list going so we know, which books I should spend all my money on. Yeah, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you soon with another horror video. Okay, goodbye.